A very familiar text that I would like to talk about for a few moments is 2 Corinthians 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Because Paul is struggling with something. We've been talking over the last few weeks from the subject, God, why are you killing me? Because sometimes you feel like God is not on your side. Instead of the great God that you know and love making things better and better, it seems the more you call on him, he seems to be letting them get worse and worse. Such was Paul's situation in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. It's hard to live in the sunshine when your life is full of fog. You know the sun is up there somewhere, you just can't see it because your vision, your sight of vision is very limited and very narrow. Paul says in verse 7 these words, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. Paul says, I had a thorn. The Greek word for thorn was used of a splinter or a needle or a fish hook, the point of a fish hook. It was an ongoing irritation that he couldn't shake. He calls it a thorn. We've grown up and many of us have put our hands in the thorn bushes and have been cut and have that thorn stick. Perhaps you've had a thorn or a splinter in your finger and you couldn't get at it. You get a needle and you're digging and digging and digging. In fact, the more you try to get rid of it, the worse things get if you can't get rid of it. Because you're trying to get rid of it. You're trying to get rid of this thing, this situation, this pain, this needling, and it's driving you crazy. He says, I had a thorn in the flesh. It was related to my physical life. Now, Paul doesn't tell us what the thorn is. There are many guesses. We know from statements that Paul makes throughout the New Testament, he had eye problems. He says in one place, I've written with large letters so that you could read them, so that he had to be able to see to write. He talks about eyes in a number of cases. So yeah, they could have had an eye problem. So it could have been a physical thorn. He talks in another place about many of the burdens that he faced. Distress and persecutions and all these mass shipwreck. And so it could have been a circumstantial burden in his life. Any number of burdens or needling. My guess, and it's a guess because he doesn't say, well, maybe he says, it depends on how you interpret it, because he says in this verse, a messenger of Satan. So it could be a person in his life who's driving him crazy. Anybody have a messenger of the devil? The Bible talks about Satan having human messengers, people who are demonically inspired to make our lives miserable. And you can't get rid of them. You know, maybe you work next to them and nobody's getting transferred. Nobody's getting relocated. Nobody's getting fired. And you can't shake it. Maybe you live with them. And they're messengers of the devil. In fact, sometimes we say that about people. You ain't nothing but the devil, right? We say that about people. So it could have been a person, but we don't know, because he doesn't say. We do know that it was the devil behind it. And the devil, through whatever this thorn was making life horrific. Horrific. It was needling him, and he couldn't shake it. He couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't get rid of it. Here's something you need to know about a thorn, and it's a critical principle. It's a difficult one to accept, but it's critical if you're going to deal with the thorn. Nothing but nothing gets to you, even if it's from the devil, that doesn't pass through God's fingers first. The devil is not sovereign, God is. He's powerful, but he's not sovereign. Even God said to the devil, have you considered my servant Job? So the devil only got to mess with Job because God okayed it. So we've got to get something straight, and it may shake your theology. It may make your theology uncomfortable to know that God, here it is, will sometimes use the devil to carry out his purposes. Now that can mess with you a little bit. That can throw you off a little bit because our position is God and the devil are at odds with one another. They're at war with one another. They disagree with one another. It's good versus evil. But God, in his purposes, will at times use the devil to fulfill God's purposes. Peter told Jesus, everybody's going to forsake you except me. In Luke 22, I am your man. I am never going to leave you and forsake me. Jesus tells Peter, Satan has requested to sift you as wheat. Satan has made a request to have you, which means Satan gets to you by permission because he made a request. He has requested to sift you as wheat. Then Jesus said, but I'm praying for you that your faith fail not. So Satan has to get approval. Sometimes, many times, maybe even most of the time, God blocks him, but not all the time. Not all the time. Why? I raise the question, why? Why would God allow the devil to get to me as one of his children? A number of reasons. Number one, this is the positive. There's a positive reason and a negative reason. Let me give you the positive. The positive reason is to increase your anointing. Let me say it again. The positive reason that God will allow the devil to get to you is to increase your anointing. Now, what do I mean by that? To expand your usefulness for God. God will let the devil mess with you so that you can experience more of God. Notice what he says, verse 7, first line, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations. For this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn. Because of all that God had done and was going to do through me, he allowed Satan in. So I have some good news, even though you won't be happy to hear it. For those who have thorns, irritants, that you want to shake and you're trying to shake, but they won't go away. God has something special for you. I've got good news for you. Now, you're feeling bad about it because it's a thorn, it's an irritant. But the good news is God has something special for you. If you read the first portion of chapter 12, Paul has been escorted into the third heaven to see things no other man has ever seen. He's the only man who has been escorted or translated to heaven who's been allowed to come back to earth to talk about it. He said, I saw things that are unlawful to utter. In other words, I can't even tell you what I saw. It would blow your mind, he says. I can't, I've been held in secret. It would be Paul who would author 13 books in the New Testament, the largest New Testament writer. It would be Paul who would pen the theology of the church, the book of Romans. It would be Paul who would be the master influencer of Christianity for the ages. God gave him a great revelation for a great purpose. So what I want you to do now in your thorn, if you happen to have one right now that you're dealing with, is I want you to know God has something special going on. The negative side of the thorn. To keep me from exalting myself. There was given me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment me. Ooh. So this thing is driving me crazy. To torment me. To keep me from exalting myself. The other reason God gives a thorn is to correct an actual or potential sin in our lives. Here was the sin of pride. See, when you've been to the third heaven and you're the only one that's been there, you're the only one on earth who can talk in detail about what heaven is like. There is nobody but you. You are the man. You are the one. It's easy to get the big head if you're the only one. And he's the only one. Nobody can do that but him. That tells us that Paul either had the problem or had the propensity for the problem of pride. So God put something in his life to keep him humble. Something in his life as a reminder that his anointing, his calling, he was never to become boastful about. Something that when he was tempted to exalt himself would pull him right back down. God put a needle to burst the balloon. Because you blow a balloon up, it gets the big head. It gets inflated. God kept this needle in there to torment him, to bring him back down to earth. So that means he had it or had the propensity for it. It's not that he didn't pray about it, verse 8. Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. Lord, get this off of me. Get me away from this person. Get me away from this situation. Ever been in a situation where every time it looked like you're about to get out, you get drugged back in? He says, I'm talking to God. I'm talking to God about 3 times. One of the questions people will often ask is, how often do you pray about something? The answer? Till you get one. Why did he stop after 3 times? Because he said, and he said to me. He got a response. So you keep talking to God until he gives you a response, but you give him the freedom to give you a response. And he has to have the freedom to give you his response, not the response you want him to give you. He said to me, so there was a word from God. That's a rhema word, because he said it to me. See, that's a rhema word. A rhema word is a specific utterance with your name on it, not a general message for everybody. This isn't an envelope with occupant on it. This is an envelope that's been mailed to you. He said to me, My grace is sufficient for you. Translation, I am not going to take away your thorn. But what I am going to do is give you something to handle the thorn that I'm not going to take away. My grace is sufficient. I don't want you to even turn to it now, but if you have not memorized 2 Corinthians 9:8, just make a note and memorize it. That verse will hold you steady when life is tormenting you. And it relates to this phrase, my grace. I have enough grace for you to handle this. His prayer was, get it off me. He said, get it off me. I pray that it might leave me. God's answer was, my grace is sufficient for this needle. But the good news is, it's because of the greater revelation. There's something bigger going on here than that you can't see right now. Well, what's this grace going to do? My power is perfected in weakness. I'm going to make you weaker, and I'm going to use the devil to do it. I'm going to use the devil to make you weaker so that you can see my power. God will never be more real to you than when you have something in your life you cannot fix. You can't fix it. The thorn won't go away. Nothing you try gets rid of it. And you feel weak, helpless, helpless, helpless. You don't know where to turn. You don't know to whom to turn. You don't know if to turn. You are helpless. He says, my grace is sufficient because with my grace comes the power in the midst of your weakness. Therefore, it must not be your power because he just told you you were weak. Well, what am I supposed to do? Most gladly then, I will boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Okay, are you sitting down? Well, I know you are, but that's rhetorical. Are you sitting down? Did you just hear what he said? In my weakness, because I'm tormented in this situation and I can't change. When I discovered the principle of grace, of the sufficiency of grace, God's supply is enough for my situation. And this torment is making me weaker. God just said that his power is perfected or matured or developed when I'm weaker. Follow this now. The needle is making me weaker. The torment is making me weaker. It's breaking me down. He says, well, in that brokenness, God is actually setting up a power plant. I will therefore most gladly boast about my weakness. Now, that's not what we do. We complain about our weakness. Lord, this thing is killing me. This thing is driving me crazy. I can't make it. Blah, 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 blah. He said, I'm a brag about it. He says, if weak is how I get strong, since I want to be strong, I'm a brag about weak. Your weakness. See, we want to praise because it's all right. He says praise when it's all wrong. Notice the responsibility. He says, power is perfected in weakness. I would rather boast in my weakness so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. In other words, I have it, I want to experience it. And what's going to make what I have my experience? My boasting. My making a big deal in the midst of my deep anguish. Therefore, I am well content with weaknesses, insults, distresses, persecutions, difficulties, for Christ's sake, because I'm maintaining my Christian position. For when I am weak, then I am strong. That goes against every fiber of our being. That goes against what's natural.
Thank you.